Welcome everyone to this event today in the COP27 Food and Agriculture Pavilion that's hosted by CGIAR, FAO and Rockefeller Foundation. And so a real big thanks to our hosts for creating such an amazing space for important conversations that have been happening. And I know if you're like me, you've been here for quite a long day. I think there was breakfast meetings going right through into the evening. So if you're dialing in online in the Americas, good morning. On this side of the earth, it's coming to that time of day where the energy has been spent, but we're gonna bring some energy and have a great conversation. So thank you for coming, and thank you to everyone who's watching online. My name is Paul Newnham, and I love beans. And so I'm here today. We're going to have a lot of conversation about beans. We've been talking about beans for the last few days. And I'm the director at the SDG2 Advocacy Hub, who is really coordinating and bringing together this new initiative called Beans is How. And so I'm just going to give a few words of introduction. We know a lot about this, and people that have been following online or that are here in the room are very aware of the challenges we face on climate, and you know, we know time is running out. At the moment, we're seeing massive increases in the way that carbon is in our atmosphere, and a real need for us to change. The population is hitting the 8 billion mark. I think I heard in another event, it's this week. I've heard in other places it's been. I think everyone's it's somewhere around now. We're hitting to, I mean, FAO might be able to give us the official time and day, but we can look at that later. But at the same time as seeing these climate impacts, we're also seeing major health impacts around micro and macronutrients, and we'll dig into a little bit more around this. And then on top of all of this, there's a real challenge around cost and affordability. And I think this is a real impact around food. We've seen many reasons contributing and making that worse. Alongside the climate crisis, but this affordability of good food is a real challenge as well that we really need to innovate around, we need to think about, and we need to address. And so at the moment, you know, one of the things that I'm really excited about is how do we excite people about things that they need to move to. There's a lot of people talking about the challenges that we face, and that's really important, that we know what's happening in the world and we know what those challenges are, and we'll dig into that in a minute. But at the same time, I think it's really important that we excite people about things that can have multiple benefits. Benefits for people, planet, and also prosperity of the farmers that grow our food. And so it's really important for us to think about that. Beans is How has an ambition. And it's an ambitious campaign to look at how do we address some of the challenges in this world through doubling the global bean, pulse, pea, lentil and legume consumption by 2028. And we see if we can double the consumption, that will also lead to changes in the way we produce. Whether we need to produce more, we need to use what we produce differently. We need to work all that out because there is a lot of production going on. Not all of it is going into the right spaces, and so we need to look at that. And what we want to do is really uplift beans and as a simple, affordable solution to some of these challenges, uplift the policy and academic research that's needed in order for us to fix the food system, and then we want to galvanize stakeholder action in a significant way so that we get people working together around common challenges. And I think this is really key. What are the things we can actually deliver on? And this is something that I think is really important. It's very good to talk and debate, but we also need to deliver. And this is part of what we're thinking about. Why beans? Well, beans, they're nutritious, they're affordable, they're climate friendly, they're a farmer's friend, and they're also resilient. They fix nitrogen in the soil. They can be grown in a variety of climatic conditions, even in poor soils and varied altitudes. They're very versatile. They can be eaten for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I know if you're here in Egypt, you maybe have had some beans at breakfast time. They also store well. They keep well, and this is really important in certain parts of the world. And I also think they're delicious. And if you don't think they're delicious, then go to our website, download a few recipes, get into the kitchen, and I think you can have a look. But I think they can help us really fix the future in disruptive ways. We've built and launched on earlier this week a new coalition And so this was on Saturday. We launched our key launch event here at COP. And this is a group of organizations, and it's growing every day. I see new organizations being added every time I see this slide, which is super exciting and dynamic. And there's already a queue of organizations that we're trying to catch up with that are wanting to join us. And the idea of this coalition is it's a diverse group of people committed to saying, let's bring a contribution for how we can contribute to this goal and how we can amplify the message of beans and how we can bring some sort of contribution to help us move forward. The coalition is still growing, and if you're interested to join us, please come to our website, get in contact with myself or Kristen or Karen or one of the team that's here at COP, or email us online. And we would love to start a conversation about what you could do to be a part of this coalition. If you haven't, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. It's at Beans is How. We're trying to share content and stories as well and get people engaged. So today's event is super exciting because we're going to be joined by several members of our newly appointed Science Innovation Advisory Council. And this group of specialists is going to aid us in helping to build the roadmap for Beans is How. They're going to contribute technical advice or expertise, help us create scientific alignment, and validate some of the messaging, because often it's very hard to know what to trust in messaging around the world. And this is something people struggle with. And so it's about bringing science into the conversation. It's going to also help us identify a baseline, identify some targets, and some indicators. And I think this is really critical in any campaign like this around food, is to have scientists in the room, have experts that can come from different fields to actually help embed and lay a foundation to move forward the work that you're doing. Otherwise, you can be putting effort into the wrong places, and that's then wasted in this emergency that we're kind of in. So this is really key. So we're going to get into the conversation, but it's an absolute pleasure to invite Claudia Sadoff, who is the Executive Managing Director of CGIAR, one of our hosts here today, to come and introduce this conversation. It's a pleasure to have CGIAR as part of the coalition, and we're looking forward to working with CGIAR and many parts of the CGIAR ecosystem, including we've got JC here from PABRA, the Pan-African Bean Alliance. Obviously has been very excited about this project because obviously it's an area where there's been lots of focus. But Claudia, thanks for having us, and please come and share a few remarks.
Thanks so much, Paul, and thanks so much for everyone who's joining us today. It's really just a great opportunity to host this Building the Beans event at our Food and Agriculture Pavilion that we're so proud to be co-hosting with our partners FAO and the Rockefeller Foundation. Each one of these organizations hosting this important pavilion is also represented on our Bean Science and Innovation Advisory Council that we are going to be hearing from this evening, along with the Pan-African Beans Alliance. And I did see JC, our friend, head of PABRA, flash up in a moment. I know he'll be joining us. So I can safely say that everyone here tonight is very interested in this set of alternative proteins. Beans, legumes, these are really an important part, really a foundational part of our shift toward a much more sustainable food system. Beans are a climate-smart crop, as we all know. They're one of the very few crops that actually improves soil health, and that's really just essential. But as Paul was saying, it's important to know that all of this effort is going in the right direction. And at CGIAR, we know that we've been working with African farmers and other partners for many years and have developed dozens of varieties of beans, including iron biofortified beans that address anemia, which is just endemic and an intractable problem in so many parts of Africa, particularly for pregnant and breastfeeding women and for small children under the age of 5. So seeing these beans really taken up is essential. In Rwanda, between just the years of 2004 and 2011, we saw a 20% increase in the production of improved higher yield varieties of beans. And that's really exciting, not only contributing to higher levels of nutrition and food security, but showing just how quickly you can really ramp up in the distribution and consumption of beans. It's both a nutrition sensitive and a climate smart agricultural action. Beans are also a crop that provide very good incomes for farmers as well, and can help build resilience and diversify farmers' livelihoods. So it's important in the face of the current crisis that we face and the growing global population that we all are seeking to feed. Doubling bean consumption is really an easy effort to support. So we applaud the effort of Paul and his teams for the Beans is How campaign and are delighted to be supporting it. Scaling up, as this campaign is suggesting, is just much more important than ever before. Initiatives like the Bean Science and Innovation Advisory Council and partnerships with the National Agricultural Research Systems are there to help us bulk up and diversify the varieties that will be critical for ending hunger. And we've seen this work going on for years now. We see 35 million more people in Africa were affected by hunger in 2020 compared to 2019, and an additional 15 million hungry in 2021, despite all of our efforts. Earlier this year, however, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Pan-African Bean Alliance, which is truly a remarkable event. And this just shows you the depth of science and the extent of effort that we're building on in this Beans is How campaign. 25 years of demonstrating the value of beans to improve food security, climate resilience, income, and the health of Africans. We've also now have an Aim for Climate sprint partner with PABRA, who will be working on a beans corridor to eliminate production bottlenecks and also improve the bean varieties to ensure that they are truly rich in protein and increasingly healing our soils, allow them to reach more consumers and ensure that they have access to the latest and best available seeds. So as CGIAR is rolling out our new portfolio of initiatives, PABRA, as a collaborative, multi-stakeholder platform, is really an inspiration to all of us, for all of us to follow and for all of us to continue to support. Beans and PABRA's influence are very much in evidence in at least 5 of our CGIAR new initiatives. Seed Equal, for example, our new seeds initiative, our seed distribution initiative, provides a new business model for seed entrepreneurship, targeting women and youth and the creation of jobs across the seed value chain. It expands livelihood options, increases incomes, and helps contribute to poverty reduction, not to mention food and nutrition security, of course. So I personally am very much looking forward to this evening of discussing how beans can help us, can bring us together to collaborate, to take concrete action, and to arrive at that goal of doubling bean consumption in the next several years. And also just to share more broadly the message of Beans is How. So delighted to be here today with all of you. Really looking forward to hearing from our new Science and Innovation Advisory panels. And I hope and I believe that we are all aligned in supporting the Beans Initiative. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much to the Advisory Council and to everyone joining us this evening. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Claudia, for your enthusiasm on this partnership and also inspiration in terms of 20% in Rwanda. That's the kind of change we need. And so we need, concentrated support to kind of get behind initiatives like PABRA and really see that change. And, the Aim for C announcements this week were really exciting to hear and to see initiatives like this alongside many others, which are all important to change our food system. And so this is really, really critical. So thank you for your support and your team's support around the world. So thank you, and thanks for hosting us again. I'm going to sit down because it's at that time of day. But I'm going to now, I'm really excited to invite our panel for this event. And we're going to have some people in person and some people online. So I'm going to invite Ismahani, the Chief Scientist from FAO, and Martin, who is the Managing Director of Resilient Agri-Food Systems at CGIAR. Please come and join us. Yes, thanks, Claudia. Come on, let's get some clapping going. Woo! Perfect. And then we also have a few members that are dialing in from different parts of the world online. So from our Science Advisory Council are going to be joining. So we have JC, who is the Global Program Leader and Director of the Pan-African Bean Alliance. We've got Jacqueline McGlade, who is the co-founder and chief scientific officer at Downforce Technologies. We've got Betty Kibara, who's the director of the Food Initiative for Africa at Rockefeller Foundation, and also one of our hosts, and also Alison Greenhouse-Bell, the founder of Conscious Impact and a public health and nutrition expert. So please welcome them as well. And I also just want to acknowledge, thank you, coming in from around the world in different parts of the evening as well. And I love that Jackie's in her kitchen where she's just been cooking beans. And she said, should I change my background? And I said, of course not. No, absolutely, so critical. So whilst we've also got many in the room that are experts in different spaces and also online, so we will try and keep this interactive. So if you do have a burning question, feel free to throw your hand up and interrupt, and we'll see how we can kind of fit that into the conversation. So we wanted to break this conversation into two segments. The first is to just really frame the context. So with this Science Innovation Advisory Group, we haven't met as a group yet. So we are going to be meeting soon because we only launched this week. So we're going to be building an agenda and rolling this out as we come into next year when things will start to come together. But the first thing we wanted to do was really frame the context and paint a bit of a picture of the future. And so we're going to start with a few conversations just around that. And we'll talk about this for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to go into a conversation of how do we double bean consumption? What are some of the things we need to think about? And it's even since we've launched on our social channels, people have been raising different ideas, different questions, different, are you talking about more monoculture? And, are you talking about different, farming techniques? What position? And we've sort of said, we need to work this out. Like these are really good conversations about how do you double? What does that look like? What are the impacts? And how do we take that forward? So we're going to try and cover a bit of ground. So we're going to ask people to keep their comments to brief, and we'll try and get a bit of dialogue going. But I'm going to start with you, Martin, and just in helping us understand the bigger picture, what are some of the challenges that we're facing currently? I think the mic may need to be switched on. Just flick that up and it should have a light come on. Perfect. So what are some of the challenges we're currently facing in the world right now, and which are coming up in the next 15 to 30 years?
Yeah, I think we have discussed this many times this week and in the last conferences at FAO and things. Of course, the world continues to lose ground in terms of what's going on in food and hunger, ending hunger by 2030. That was the idea. But we are not going to make it so far if we keep on going as we do. So we have all these shocks. I called something like a perfect storm 3 years ago. Just 800 million people hungry already in Africa, South Asia. 2 billion people extra by 2050 in South Asia and in Africa. And then with climate change. Climate change hitting the crops, the main crops. Not in Europe and the United States, there their yields go up, but especially in South Asia and in Africa, their yields go down. So that's a major issue, and so the fragility is enormous because now we've seen with COVID and what happened in Ukraine, the crisis is complete. It's unbelievable. So we need to build more resilient local food systems in the fragile regions. That's, I think, the main target. Now, we can keep on giving numbers and things how fragile we are, but we all know it. And the problem is a little bit, the numbers are so high that precise numbers don't care. If it's 3 billion people live in context and are highly vulnerable, 3 billion or 3.3 billion, come on. We don't have to go deeper and deeper and deeper in those numbers. We have to find solutions. And that's what we try to do at CGIAR. with our partners, with FAO in many ways, but also with our national systems in the countries, in the global south where we are working. And then we have to diversify. Very important. Of course, we do well with wheat and maize and rice, but we have to diversify. By the way, the beans program that we had so far was already doing super well. I remember even 5 years ago in the System Management Board that, and in the System Council that our especially American funders said, you can do whatever you want with CRPs, but we want to fund 20 million per year in our beans program. And I only saw it when I was visiting CIAT recently, how great the program is, and especially with the new gene bank there. Yeah. It's really amazing what's happening. So a lot of good foundations, but of course we didn't invest as much in breeding in beans like what we have been doing in wheat and maize and rice. Yeah. Of course not. But now in the new CGIAR also, we will diversify much more. Yeah. And I think also in genetics, but not only genetics, but also in growing the beans, and there's major opportunities. Yeah. I've been doing quite a lot on it myself. I had, I think, 15 PhD students in Africa, Africans, yeah, working on mixed cropping systems, yeah, intercropping with beans. But of course it's more complicated. I can say a few words about it later, but the key is that beans are not just nutritious and nice to eat. I like beans myself as well. I grew up with beans at home, but basically also, for example, to suppress weeds. When you have these maize fields, there's all this open space, and weeds are doing better than crops most of the time, right? That's why they are weeds. And if you grow in an intercrop legumes in between the maize, then you can also suppress the weeds and they don't damage the maize so much. So there's a win-win-win situation in that sense. So I think there's an enormous potential for beans. You mentioned on many beautiful examples, but agriculture, we have to work. One important remark I got from our people, global agriculture productivity has declined by nearly 21% in the past 60 years compared to what it could have been without climate change. So we have already a major damage, and we don't know because agriculture productivity keeps on going up. But without climate change, it would have been higher already. So we really have to take beans, but also other smaller crops into account right now. So let's stay with that.
No, thank you, Martin. And I mean, if anyone hasn't been to the Gene Bank in Cali, it's definitely worth putting on your agenda to go and visit. I learnt so much going there and was so amazed by that experience, just in terms of the biodiversity, understanding how research happens. Because, you know, often you hear about research, but then seeing it in the field is critical. I think that I might be losing this mic. Let's see. Look, I'll turn to you, Ismahani. So, you know, there's lots of challenges here. How could a campaign around doubling beans, what could that actually do? You're working at the FAO. What do you think a campaign on doubling beans could actually do for some of these big challenges we face?
So I think, Paul, the focus on beans and doubling the productivity on beans should be seen as an example, should be seen as an example of increasing diversification of our agri-food system. So I might have been repeating it too much, but we don't have enough plant species in the market. We don't have animal species in the market. We don't have enough bacteria in the market. We don't have all of the microorganisms as well. So for me, and that's why FAO is very supportive, it's an example of bringing back a family. It's the family of beans that actually has about 18,000 species. So the idea is really to take it as an example, but to really look at other families and bring back those families, be it in fisheries, be it in animal, be it in plant or bacteria. So what we need to keep in mind is that even when we talk about a species or a family, we have to do also intra-family diversification, intra-species diversification. And even if we talk about a species, we have to make sure that we have a genetic pool that is large enough. Not like what we did with wheat and maize, whereby we really narrow very much the genetic base. So as for geneticists, we look at within the species, the subspecies, the family, And you need to have a large number of diversification across the species, but even when you go within one, you keep as much diversification as possible. Beans particularly, and as Martin said, the challenges we have, the only solution I see myself really, it's in diversification. And that diversification goes in terms of species, it goes in terms of actors. We have to also think diversification in terms of actors, in terms of business models. So the business model, it's one of our major issues that we need to crack. We cannot keep the farmers really limited at the production. We need to get them to walk the path with us in the agri-food systems. Farmers should be people that own the system, should be part of the pre and post. And we can talk about that in terms of rural development. So when we talk about rural development, it's bringing to the rural other parts of the agri-food system, not limiting them to the production, and that's what we need to do in beans. We have to make sure that we give the farmers space to do much more than just production per se.
No, absolutely, and I love that you framed up just there, you know, that this is an example or this is a test case for other systems. That's essentially, this idea came from, let's start with something that we can kind of all get a bit more agreement on. We get that going, prove that we can do it, and then we take on other, you know, species and other things, because we need to dial up the diversity. And I think this is really critical. But I also, you know, bringing the farmers in, we had farmers at our opening, very critical to have the farmers' voices here. While we're talking, we've framed this challenge a little around consumption, which is the demand side, but we definitely understand very clearly that it's the production side has to be a part of that interrelationship between demand, and we have to think about how that comes together. So,
Paul, and sorry, definitely, Paul. And for many people, I think the curve of return on investment, it goes very low and it goes up, and that lower part is the farmer. So how could we make sure that the farmer increase their their income if we don't get them part of the value chain? And the largest return on investment is logistic. It's supermarkets. So it doesn't really make sense. And I think for the beans particularly, as a Moroccan, in my childhood, everybody produces beans, different ones, particularly faba bean, but also chickpea and others. Right now, very little. And it's because of the national system that walked away from it. It left it 100% to the private sector, without maybe the right policies and the right framework around it. And that went down the hill.
So we need to make sure we bring that pulses in. I would like to go to our virtual panelists and get them to chime in. I can see lots of nodding. I can see note writing. I can see lots of agreement. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say. So we're thinking about, you know, going 5 years from now, what would the future look like if we accomplish our goals? And what sort of exciting advances do you hope we achieve as a council? I'm going to go to you first, Alison, then you, Betty, then Jackie, and then JC. So just so you can get your thoughts prepared. But over to you, Alison.
Yeah, well, thank you, Paul, and just wonderful to be with you all today, virtually and kind of in situ over in Egypt. And delighted that the focus and spotlight is on beans, because we know how critical beans are for so many kind of aspects of both human health and planetary health, and important, we talked about prosperity too. So my particular interest, as you know, is kind of nutrition and, you know, how beans can be impactful to arrest some of the declines that we're seeing to achieve our global goals, which we know, you know, we are not on track. We're desperately off track, and especially of late when we're seeing climate and the economic situation and conflict further exacerbate that. So I'm particularly interested in the fact that this is really packs a punch from a nutrition point of view. So if you think about fiber, so beans are kind of plentiful in both kind of viscous and fermentable fiber. As we know that is so important for so many aspects of our health, including our microbiome. And our microbiome is our engine house, if you like, of our immunity. So that alone, surely, is reason to believe why we need to eat more beans. We also have kind of protein and, of course, essential vitamins and minerals. What I would like to see, that's all very rational, isn't it? Really rational. And we could spend all day talking about the whys and why beans are brilliant, because they are. What I would like to have is real focus on creating desirability with beans. They're delicious, they're affordable, they're amazing in terms of kind of, you think about kind of the nitrogen fixing in the soil. There are so many reasons in which to consume, but we're not consuming. Global intakes are falling. How do we inject that desirability? How do we flip the rational to emotional and really making sure that they are centre on the plate or in the bowl, on the shelf, in school meals, in the farmers' kind of fields? And that's what I would like to see focused within the campaign, to make sure that we've got that rightful mix.
Thank you, Alison. Absolutely, and I think that desirability is very important, because I think that really is the start of the conversation, and that demand will then come, and we can then also then focus on the right kinds of varieties within that, but any of the diversity is a good move. Okay, let's hear from you, Betty.
Yeah, so thank you so much, and I'm very honored to also serve in the Scientific Innovation Council. And we at the Rockefeller Foundation, we are implementing our good food strategy, where we are seeking to improve the data quality by directing private sector investment and public sector investment to focus on good food. And I'm happy. First, I'm a farmer. I grow beans. I actually do high iron and zinc beans. So I'm totally, now I'm told I'm a beaner. And we are also partnering with AGRA to advance bean consumption for school feeding programs for biofortification, not just by beans, but by fortified beans. And we are working in 3 countries, Malawi, Kenya, and Tanzania. And I think for us, we are looking at beans in terms of assuring the farmers that we have an institutional market. You can imagine, beans is consumed almost in any other school. And if we can provide that market, so the kids are going to benefit and the farmers are also going to benefit. So that said, what is it that I'm thinking about the future? What do I expect for the future? Is a number of things. So first, I'm expecting that through this campaign, we're also going to have a lot of innovations around the product, the bean itself. I know right now we have, for example, the bean flour, we have the pre-cooked beans, but that's not it. I also wish I could see a billboard which reads beans is how, and with all those nutrition benefits. Why do we only have to advertise for Coke and the others? So I think for me, I'm looking at where we also begin to change and shift the systems, the social behavior change campaigns. And of course, we know, for example, beans is considered as a poor man's meat. But I'm also hoping that it's going to be, in the future, it's going to be considered to be a healthy man's meat. I also think and look forward to some innovation. And here, when I talk about innovation, it's not just about the product innovation, but is innovation around production. For example, when we are trying to promote the high iron beans, you cannot even get enough. We wanted to do it this season with one of some organization here in Kenya which supports the school feeding programs, but we could not even get enough. So I think I am also hoping that we can also have innovations that help us, whether we are working with mid-sized farms or large farms, plus the smallholder farmers. And then in the midst of the climate change, how do we also address the issue of irrigation? I understand you can do 4 crops in a year. I'm not sure whether that's so, but I think if that is so, then we can begin to also have farmers doing this as a business, as a cash crop for them. My other understanding is that, of course, the government supports fertilizer subsidies, and we have been trying to understand what if, with the high prices of fertilizer, what if government supported the seed themselves, the bean seed? I'm not sure that many organizations are doing that, many governments are doing this, but I think that's also something I'm looking forward to. And above all, I'm also looking at, attracting innovative financing. There are many SMEs in Africa that are doing some exciting work around the beans, and can we be able to access the financing they need? The Rockefeller Foundation, for example, we have the Good Food Innovation Fund, where we are opening a window for, a bean challenge. And we want to see more of this. I mean, Rockefeller is just one organization, but we would want to see more of this. And just talking about the biofortified beans, I think it was just mentioned here, it's very powerful, especially because of the high levels of zinc and iron in terms of solving issues of anemia. But you cannot even get the seeds themselves. And even when you get them, we don't have enough quantity. So the whole of that production and connecting production with consumption is going to be key. And then finally, we're all talking about climate change, and we know that beans are a regenerative crop. So I'm also looking to see what role do they contribute. We know, for example, they fix a lot of nitrogen, but how much studies have been done on the quantities of the amount of nitrogen which they fix, and what is overall, as you think about regenerative agriculture, what is the role of beans? So I think I'm very, very excited about this, and I'm looking forward to providing my insights and input into the council. And thank you so much for inviting me today.
No, thank you, Betty. And it's great to hear about the announcement this week of the Rockefeller investment and how that's going to really focused on stimulating real energy around this on the practical on the ground that can kind of unlock that public funding. Jackie, to you.
Great, thank you, and wonderful to be with you this evening. What a wonderful panel to be part of, thank you. I'm going to have two bites at the apple, totally different ends of the spectrum, which you're probably expecting. Sitting here as the co-scientist and co-founder of Downforce is about soil, because we've been doing trials now with a number of farmers across the world, and they've been asking about legumes, about beans, because we all know how great they are to put nitrogen, on the plate and to get it literally mobilized and to improve soils. But the question they asked was, can you see any detectable difference when you intercrop with beans, with legumes, on the carbon? And so we've been doing trials looking at legumes, looking at them in rotation, and sure enough, year on year, very small amounts, they really are contributing to soil organic carbon. But they're doing it in a very strange way. Well, not a strange way, very interesting way scientifically, and it leaves a huge sort of area of research for us, which is that sometimes it's not immediately that they have their effect, but there's a long-term legacy effect. So after 1 or 2, 3, 4 crop rotations, then you see the soil carbon sort of beginning to take off very quickly. But if you put them in certain rotations, the soil almost comes to a halt and has to start again. So if you go from lupins to wheat, for example, you lose all the carbon that you stored during the time that you grow lupins. So I think this opens up a very important area for scientists to really think about how we put beans into cropping systems. It's not enough to be good. It's got to be good in its practice as well. And I think that's where we can add a lot to understanding how soils will nurture us. And talking of nurturing, that's really also a passion of mine. It's been like this for years when I was a scientist, but in all of my dealings in environment and health, is the first 1,000 days of children. And it's so critical that, if you have malnutrition in those first 1,000 days, then you do not see children developing their hippocampus, which is the sort of core of admiration and virtue and compassion. And we now have longitudinal studies that show that children who are malnourished, where you see them, with these two conditions, either marasmus or kwashiorkor, they literally don't have a well-developed sense of executive powers. And what that means, at age 15 and upwards, they're going to be people in their sense of contributing to society who won't have self-control, who will literally be able to move with a crowd violently because they don't have that part of the brain developed in the first 1,000 days. Now, how serious is that? I mean, that's literally potentially blighting a whole generation of young people unless we're very careful. So they may not die of starvation, but the malnutrition will have a huge effect. So I've been working and have been working for many years trying to see how we can introduce beans at a much earlier age into children's food, because sometimes beans are not that palatable. So you have to sort of think about children's food and how we can bring them in a little bit of the natural sweetness and so on and so forth. So I think that food processing. We need to think about how to get all of those wonderful local things. In Kenya, well, I'm sitting with two who are in Kenya as well, but, you know, pigeon peas, cow peas, green gams, you know, you name it. We've got dolichos beans, we've got everything. And if you stack up what they bring, of course they bring thiamine and B1 and copper and iron and so on. But I happen to be married to a Maasai, and we don't grow food. They think putting a hole in the ground is a bad idea, but they will accept beans that come from the local farmers. And so trying to introduce this into pastoralist nutrition and diet is incredibly important in the face of drought. So I see the campaign, we need to sort of take the story through the eyes of those who are challenged even by having agriculture, and see how we can get beans into those children's diets, so that, you know, it doesn't matter that you're a pastoralist right in the edge of the Sahel and the cattle are not doing very well. They're going to have protein, and they're going to have it in the form of beautiful, tasty beans. So those are my two ends of the spectrum, Paul, that I want to bring to the science.
This is absolutely fascinating. I think there is so much room for investigation and for really thinking about kind of a cross-cutting interest here across different science pathways. I can see Claudia writing notes in the front row for ideas. So, okay, JC, I'm going to hear from you, and then I'm going to come back to Martin and Ishmahani.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Good evening, everybody. Good morning, depending on where you are. Jean-Claude Rubiogo, I'm the director of the Pan-African Bean Research Alliance, and also the leader of the bean program of the Alliance, which is a member of one CGIAR2. I'm based in Nairobi. Yeah, I mean, it's always exciting to tell my story. It's good to be the team leader of the beans, but also being a Rwandan who grew up in a smallholder systems. My mom used to manage around 20 or 28 varieties in one small plot. And it could help her. I could see she knew which variety where to plant it, combination of early maturing so that the household have food while others are still maturing. Really, women were very good in really managing all this diversity, as my colleague from FAO talked about. And this could help us to really to shorten the hunger period, but at the same time, also even help neighbors. And then we started working with the RAB, which was desired that time, to get improved varieties. In my mom's farm was very critical, because I was working as a bean researcher, technician, and I could get a variety from our research, getting to her farm, and she became a seed producer at the local level. She employed many people, even their neighbors, to take care of that diversity and continue working with them. So that inspired me to continue working on bees until now. That's my small story. But then, if I look at really, thank you, Paul, to have brought us together and being also part of this scientific advisory council. So for me, what I think has been talked about, I can only appreciate the effort of every speaker, but I think we still have to do really a big way. Really, I think Martin talked about strengthening resilience. We need really to look at optimization to see how we optimize our breeding for climate resilience. This is for disease, this is for short duration. We've been able to get a variety of 65 days, which is great. That means in 2 months you can really harvest and eat. But we really need to see how do we bring in also many other tolerance to yield stability, not just short duration, but yield stability, so that the farmer is incentivized, because the farmer is incentivized in 2 ways: by better productivity, by better marketability too. So we really need to see how we stabilize the production, increase it through climate resilience. That will be very, very important. And then also my colleague talked about it, Jackie and others, talked about nutritional breeding. I'm not sure before we even start looking for various property of beans, including iron and zinc, people are consuming it. But the moment you really look at this property very well, the nutritional breeding, and you can look at various property beans can offer, you can really see how you can get consumers interested in the crop. So I'm thinking really nutritional breeding, consumption-oriented research. We have started working on reduction of cooking time, breeding. How do you reduce breeding? How do you reduce cooking time through a breeding process? Because the grain composition plays a role, and that's a genetic factor. We've started to see how we want to reduce breeding short cooking time by 30% in the next 3 to 4 years. So that's, again, that will allow not only that to cut the cost, to cut the time for women who are in the kitchen for too long, more than men, but also environmentally friendly because we really reduce energy use, and energy use in cities is a major problem, even in rural area. So that's something we are really keen to see. And I'd rather also see, as Jackie indicated, peas are made of beans. Why don't you have toppings of beans and hummus and that? So we really see how they can really be packaged in such a way that the millennia generation takes it as well. So that's something we're interested in. Getting these varieties in the hands of the farmer, Betty talked about it. The way my mom used to really distribute to farmers. That time we didn't have a certified seed, but she could become a source of seed to really hundreds of other farmers, women farmers. And particularly we need to think, how do we get this seed in the hands of the farmer, women particularly, because the majority of the ones planting beans and growing beans for the nutrition and for market as well. Another important area is how do we incentivize the farmer? That's very important because whatever we do, unless the farmer has incentives through better productivity, stable yield, which comes from breeding a better agronomy, otherwise she will not be able to continue growing beans as well, and better marketability of their product. So if we could do that, and then we can have beans for women empowerment. Because for me, really, if you empower women, you empower the families, you empower the nation, you empower the villages, and they can really do a better job when it comes to household and family issues more than men, of investing in the new generation through nutrition. So we're looking already for beans for investment, so that does not really continue being a small crop, but you can see beans which create jobs, which incentivize other investment in processing and many other products. Putting at this billboard you're talking about, Betty, will come from really this bigger investment. We have started working with the investors across Africa who are processing beans to other products here in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Burundi, in Malawi, in Tanzania too. And we're also looking for really these ones providing large quantities to the schools rather than them cooking the beans. They can deliver pre-cooked beans. The same with other institutions too, but also different other products. So we'll really appreciation of this, of one CGIAR, of various donors who have supported us in this as well. Thank you for bringing us together, Paul. Yeah.
Thank you, JC. And I mean, every time we have a conversation about beans and science and innovation, my mind sort of gets expanded from the people in the room. And you know, we always tend to run out of time in these conversations, but there's so many areas to look in. Ishmahane, what you wanted to jump in?
I want to just remind us that legumes, including beans, it's really the best example of symbiosis. So when we talk about nature-based solutions, it's mimicking nature. And in nature, many species live together and live in symbiosis. One eats the other, and then there is a benefit back. So it's always two ways. And legumes and beans are really the best example of symbiosis in the root system, where we have a bacteria called rhizobium, enters the root, it gets swollen, and then you got the noodles, and basically in those nodules, you got the bacteria that eats from the plant, but in the same time, it takes nitrogen from the air and bring it in the plant as a fertilizer. So for me, whenever I think symbiosis, and I use this word quite a lot in a relationship, because between people or between institutions, between countries, we need always to keep the symbiosis in mind. Everybody has to benefit from the relationship, so it's sustainable, it's continuous, and legumes is the best example of symbiosis with the rhizobium bacteria.
Absolutely. Martin, do you want to add any reflections from the conversation so far?
No, of course we fully agree, and
it's on.
this is one of the best examples. That's why we have these big projects, End to Africa, and all those kind of projects where we really try, because we want to be careful with fertilizers because they are expensive, right? So for nitrogen, there is a partly solution, especially when you have intercropping systems, so that in the longer term, that's very important, otherwise it doesn't work. And carbon sequestration and those kind of things. But also, I think the PABRA project, and JC is here explaining things, but he is one of our heroes of the CGIAR, to be honest. All the time when I talk to funders about integrated initiatives where you bring breeding together with agronomy and together with better policy making, they keep on talking to me about take PABRA. So PABRA is now part of the regional integrated initiative in Eastern and Southern Africa. At the pressure of the funders. The Swiss donors said, we want that part in that initiative. And you know, rightly so. So congratulations with building up something, not just breeding, but the whole package in that sense. No, and I think in the research, the nitrogen fixing, I also is one of the points here. But the key is that we have to look at the systems approach. Yeah. I remember with my PhD students in Africa, for example, the one in Zimbabwe, it was very disappointing, to be honest, because only the treatments where you added some rock phosphate, very little, there you saw basically that the maize and the beans were seriously producing something. So this is also something very important in our thinking about Africa. We can talk about agroecological solutions, but you know, plants need not only nitrogen, they also need phosphorus and potassium. Potassium is less of a problem, but phosphorus is key. So I think that the systems approach that JC is also bringing in all the time, that helps to really go for the future and find solutions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, one of the things we're now going to be, you know, thinking about as we take this project forward is what's the roadmap. And so we've got a 5-year roadmap starting at the beginning of next year, really. But it's about what should we do in what order. So, like, what do we need to do, one, so that we can get to year 5? How do we move this forward? And so it's looking at that. And this is going to be something that we're going to talk a bit more about. We're not going to be able to answer it all here today just because of time, but it's how we move that picture forward and really try and paint a picture in terms of driving that doubling the global consumption. Maybe if I use this one, is that better? I can try this one. Okay, is that better? Yeah. Sorry, I've got a bit of a crackle in my microphone, which is always a bit disconcerting when you've got people online as well. So, I mean, to me, as we move this forward, we're going to be looking at what is the different ways we can kind of drive that forward, and how do you build a kind of a scientific roadmap, a research roadmap, an innovation roadmap into what needs to happen in what order, how do we get that funded, how do we get that resourced, who do we need around the table. And I think just even hearing from the people on the call today and in the room, we need this diversity of approaches. We need to be looking at the nutrition, we need to be looking at the incentivization, how do we get this to market, we need to be thinking about what are the potential downsides, how do we use technology, and all of those kinds of situations. So it's to me that holistic approach is really critical. As we're coming to a close on the conversation, but I just wanted to maybe just ask, you know, Jackie, can you tell us a little bit about just one of the things I'm conscious of is we need to be able to show measurement. Can you talk to me a little bit about just how could technology help us in mapping impact and communicate some of those challenges just as we kind of move this forward?
Well, I'd like to sort of start from the basics, which is that we have to have healthy land. If we're going to grow food, that's absolutely got to be where we're starting with. And one of the things that we're able to measure with downforce is to be quite honest, to an accuracy which I never, I could only have dreamt about a few years ago. But with that accuracy, it brings something else, which is a step up in understanding the kind of feedback that we really need to see in terms of the health of soils and the health of people. So if you use things like beans and legumes in the cropping rotation, you don't only get the improvement locally in the soil health, but it starts to impact whole catchment. And we've already seen that by improving soil health slowly, the soil has got a greater water holding capacity. And when you're in semi-arid and marginalized lands, these things are absolutely critical, because you then find yourself able to just raise soil moisture sufficiently to be able to change the outcome of any one growing season. And in the converse, when it's, you have a flood-prone area, not of course, unfortunately, as you have in Pakistan, but those floods that are very, very common everywhere, and which can destroy crops and can destroy land. If you have healthy soils, of course, you can withstand a much higher degree of waterlogging than when you have very poor soils. So soils act as a sort of intermediary, and I think that those are the metrics that are at the base of the pyramid that help us then build that nutritional, uplift, which then tells us about what I like to call the science of deliciousness. Beautiful soil, beautiful land is going to give us delicious food. And I'm sure that there is maybe the CGIAR, the one CGIAR could have a program called the Science of Delicious Food. And we can answer all the questions about what is palatable, what is tasty, but also what is it about the mixtures locally that make food so delicious when it's grown well. But I think those are the kinds of metrics that we need to strive for, not just the physics, not just the biology, but things to do with their appetite, the way that people respond to food. So that whole social dimension is incredibly important as we go forward as being.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love the way you're thinking outside the box here, because this is exactly what we need. We need this interdisciplinary approach, thinking in a symbiotic way. Alison, any reflection? I'm going to ask people to be very brief, but Alison, any reflection?
Well, just to build on that, I think, and we were talking about desirability earlier, if you think about the role that beans plays in society, so we think about, again, we're talking about rational kind of concepts here, aren't we? Kind of why beans are good for us, but just let's explore how important they've been in cultures around the world for so many years, how dear they are in terms of expression of love and connection, and do not underestimate the power of beans and its history within cultures and how diverse that is, as well as the different types. So I'd love us to be emotional as we kind of move forward here.
Wow. Okay. Emotional. That's sometimes not what I bring to science, but I think it's awesome. And I'm seeing very passionate science and innovation members in the room. And so I think this connection and bringing that culture in, thinking about the soil and the deliciousness and how those connections are made, I think is really resonant with lots of conversations. I know I work with a lot of chefs, and chefs are often talking about how do you get ingredients, and many are frustrated by what they can find, so they go and work locally with farmers to almost curate together ingredients. And so I think this kind of conversation and how we bring that to beans, how we look at that, I think is really critical. We are coming to a close, and so we've not really, I feel we're just at the beginning of this conversation, and it's so close, but I'm asking for some short interventions. So short, I'm talking 30 seconds, go, Ishmahane.
So you remember we had the Year of Pulses in 2016, and FAO afterwards, we have now the Day of Pulses.
Yes.
So I think really seeing this coming up in a program, it's excellent. What I want us to remember is that every ecosystem, it's made to produce something different. So as we are pushing for legumes or beans, we have to keep that diversification. And it's like if we have to respect the ecosystem, it's like respecting organs. So you can't ask kidney to play the role of a heart or a stomach to play. So this is ecosystem. Every ecosystem has a diversification and a flow and a food chain that works for certain things. So just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Martin?
Yeah, and for me, super important, the consumer. Because you told me today, I didn't know that, to be honest. I thought everybody was keen on beans and liked them, right? When you go to South Asia, India and so on, it's all legumes and beans and those kind of things. So if that is the case, for example, in some countries that they see it as poor man's food, then we have to do something about that. We had the same problem when we had the orange and the yellow maize. Because yellow maize is for animals and white maize is for people. So, and then we got the yellow, the orange maize with provitamin A, and people had the same feeling, like we don't like it at all.
Yeah.
So then CG scientists, I think it was especially from SIAT, from the Harvest Plus program, they started doing marketing programs, bringing it to the people. Like with orange flesh sweet potato, the same story. That was really successful. So you need more to explain to people why it is nice, and it takes time. So it's not just production, it's not just taking what the consumer likes now, but also can we help the consumer to make it more delicious. And I like the term science of delicious food. I think Claudia and I will take this on, and can we refer to you and make it ours?
No, I'm writing a book with some chefs, so you have to ask them. Well, but love it if you use it. It's been just great.
And I know what you're just saying, Martin. Betty, you were talking a lot about, you were talking about that billboard, talking about the nutritional benefits of food, really that marketing and working in, starting at school programs, incentivizing, building that foundation. Do you want to say a final comment on that?
Yeah, I think for me, my comment is the 2 M's, money and market. If you show the farmers there is money in bean production, they're going to produce, and if you give them a market, they'll also produce, and they'll be incentivized to produce. But we must think about the system. It's not just about the market and the money. There is extension and many other things which are involved. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And JC, have you got a short intervention of 30 seconds? Because I'm about 1 minute over.
I'm thinking about really beans for women empowerment, and they really need to do our research to allow women to be the owner of these crops as they have been traditionally. So we need to make sure that they are not disempowered, but really these crops are there to empower them, to make them economically, to make them strong in their families, and to improve nutrition of the kids too. Yeah.
Thank you, JC, and very important to really think about the gender elements involved in this, and that's something that has come up quite a bit as well. So many things, so much food for thought. I just want to thank again FAO, Rockefeller and CGIAR for hosting us today. Thank you to each of our panelists for bringing just insight, wisdom and energy at the end of a long day. I'm so excited to be working with you in different ways to really make this happen. This can't happen without your expertise, your science, your guidance, your advice and your insights. And so absolutely appreciate that. Big thanks to the tech team and also to my team here, Karen and Kristen, who have been here. And we're going to be outside, hosted by CGIAR, with some beans, talking to people tomorrow. Please don't eat the beans, they're not cooked. Somebody tried that today and we were like, no! But please feel free, if you would like to talk to us and you are here, come by. We'd love to talk to you about the campaign, hear your ideas that you slept on and woke up with for driving forward change. And if you're online watching, we would love you to reach out online on any of the social platforms. But thank you, everyone. We're excited to continue the conversation and appreciate all of your time. Thank you very much.